Okay, welcome back to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's June 23rd public hearing. We have one item this afternoon, which we will be beginning next. And I will now turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to read that item into the record.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. As mentioned, the next and last item of the day is item number 8, LPC 20-09702. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 2111, lot 40, 130 St. Felix Street in the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. This is currently a vacant lot, and the application is to construct a new building.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. I'm now given control of the presentation. You may state your name for the record and then begin.
So good afternoon, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. This is Dan Kaplan, Senior Partner at FX Collaborative Architects. With me is Brian Kelly from the Gotham organization and Shelby Green from the Brooklyn Music School, Chair of the Board. Should I share my screen with the presentation?
The presentation is up currently, and I believe Mr. Bouchon is going to be advancing the slides, from my understanding.
Okay, very good. Thank
you. And you just need to click on the screen to activate it, and then you can use the arrow keys to advance and use your mouse to point out as needed.
Dan, it's Jim. Why don't you try that first and see if you can control it?
Right. So
Jim, you have actually been given control of it.
Okay.
So
Jim, go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
So we are going to start. Brian Kelly from the Gotham organization is going to start, and Jim, if you can go to the next slide.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce the proposed development at 130 St. Felix Street. I'm going to provide some introductory remarks, and then Dan Kaplan of FX Collaborative will present the site planning and architecture. I'd like to focus on background, the site, the program, and our outreach, and then Dan will cover all the relevant certificate of appropriateness items relative to design, site planning, building form, etc. In terms of history of the site purchase, as background, an affiliate of the Gotham organization purchased this development site in 2015. The purchase was actually initiated by the Brooklyn Music School, inquiring with responsive and capable developers about the possibility of creating a new home at the site as part of a larger development. Gotham took the initiative, and after years of conversations, different design iterations, and feedback from various stakeholders, we have arrived at this moment. We have listened. For reference, the site is a former ancillary parking lot to One Hanson that was sold in the open market as a development site. It was fully disclosed in the condo offering plan for One Hanson condo buyers that a future development could occur at the site. As a result, the sponsor of that condo, One Hanson, created easements benefiting One Hanson to ensure that future development would be harmonious with the iconic landmark building. I think you'll see this in our presentation. In terms of BMS and Gotham's background, we recognize that with beautiful and historic surroundings comes a lot of responsibility. Gotham, as well as BMS, are the right fit to undertake that. We both have 100-year-plus legacies and deep roots in this great city. So I'd say we're part of history. BMS is an inclusive school that has expanded the cultural and arts realm through the ups and downs of the city and works very hard to provide access to those of lesser economic means. Gotham is a community developer whose track record spans the construction and or development of more than 30,000 apartments, including a substantial portion as affordable housing. We have a legacy of partnering with institutions and not-for-profit organizations to create or renovate hospitals, cultural destinations, place-making retail, senior housing, mixed income housing, schools, and various other community facilities. Almost all of these initiatives are undertaken in public-private partnership, where we work with communities to plan an idea, listen, and then effectuate a business plan. The program, which you'll see on this sheet for the site, includes a 24-story building, not to exceed 285 feet in height, including the mechanical bulkhead. The building will include approximately 120 for-sale residences, including 35 for moderate income homeowners through mandatory inclusionary housing. The base of the building at 3 levels from the cellar to the second floor will include a modern expansion for Brooklyn Music School, enabling improved accessibility and much needed space for its robust growth. Architecturally, the building, as you will see as Dan presents, tapers through setbacks and aims to respect the street and civic scale. We believe it blends in with the old while creating a positive new addition to the neighborhood. We have focused on striking a balance with height and density while creating a building with enough market rate units to cross-subsidize the cost of building BMS's space, as well as approximately 35 MIH affordable homeownership units without any direct city housing subsidy on the capital side. This is critical given HPD's announced 40% capital cuts over the next 2 years. The materials and palette you will see are all high quality and inspired by buildings in the district. Tremendous thought and planning went into orientation of the building, maintaining view corridors of the surrounding buildings, respecting the easements that benefit One Hanson specifically, and the skyline. We're at a pivotal point in the city, and this is an ideal time to make our mark in the history books together. The creation of new housing, especially affordable home ownership, in a landmark district is rare. Home ownership is a path not only to financial security, but social equity. The expansion of BMS at a time when public school funding for the arts and culture has hit an all-time low creates an opportunity for BMS to give back to the community and to improve a vacant lot that frankly is a missing tooth in the block with a mixed use and contextual proposal could be a milestone. In wrapping up my opening notes, we're excited to hear your thoughts, Commission and Commissioner, on the detailed plans and rationale that Dan will provide. However, I would be remiss to fail to explain to you that we have the support of many religious, arts, and civic groups, as well as individuals. Those entities include Mokata, BAM, 32BJ, Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, Downtown Brooklyn Arts Alliance, Downtown Brooklyn Liberty Church, as well as numerous local Brooklyn residents. We've also met with the Landmark Conservancy, MAS, and many other groups. Notably, the Community Board referred the application in favor with a vote of 7-2 as proposed. Lastly, I would be lying if I said there wasn't resistance. Not everyone wants change, especially those who want to see nothing get built, because a sense of entitlement for perpetual views. In this case, the gains for the greater good far outweigh the minimal impact upon the views of a select few. We believe this proposal respects historical context, and many people and groups whom we've spoken with see progress as the only way forward. With that, I really appreciate the time to provide these opening statements, and I pass this to Dan to move forward with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. And Dan, before you begin, I just want to note for the record that Commissioner Bland is recused on this item. He has not been present for any of this initial part of the presentation and will not be present for the remainder of the afternoon. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I will run through the presentation, and it's basically there'll be background information on the site, the historic district, the zoning. There's a rezoning action as part of this development. a design proposal and some details on the materiality and so forth. As you can see from this slide, the site is a mid-block site between Ashland and St. Felix Street in the historic BAM Historic District, which is outlined in green. This is the aerial. You can see the development site in red, Ashland Place on the top of the screen, St. Felix on the bottom. The development site is actually composed of 3 lots that are all combined. Brooklyn Music School to the bottom of the screen, the development parcel, and 1 Hanson Place, formerly known as the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower. It is falls between the Brooklyn Music School and the Hanson Place Church. The site itself has 47 feet of frontage on Ashland Place, and is, as I said, falls between the 1 Hanson Place building and BAM on the north. This is BAM Fisher, which was the former Salvation Army headquarters. On St. Felix, which the west side of the street is characterized, and we'll get into this in more detail, by a front of civic buildings. The east side is characterized by a row of houses. It has 84 feet of frontage on that site, and we'll show you more in a moment. Ashland Place, looking east, BAM Fisher, and 1 Hanson Place. As Brian mentioned, there are several items that are part of the support infrastructure for 1 Hanson Place that are in the development site: emergency generators, a loading dock. You can see at the top of the screen here a vent stack. There's an egress passageway, and from St. Felix, looking back the other way, very importantly, from this setback up, this set of windows is protected by a light and air easement. This diagram that you see encapsulates those easements, and they will be germane to the massing as we get into it. The blue here really is that light and air easement. These are egress easements and the loading easement, and finally the generator easement. Now, getting into the district itself, the BAM district is a very interesting historic district. Our site is just to the right in your screen to the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower. It really is a polyglot of various styles and typologies. There's the core, which is the brownstone townhouses, which starts on the east side of St. Vincent, St. Felix. There's a cast iron commercial scale on Fulton, but really germane to our proposal are these 3 buildings: 67 Hanson, which is 15 stories, 1 Hanson, which is 41 stories, both, and the church. All 3 of these were built in the late 20s as in response and supported by the new subway lines that were constructed on St. Felix, below St. Felix Street and Ashland Place, which I'll show you in a moment. And also of interest is that the church and the 1 Hanson Place were both designed by the same architect, Halsey, McCormick, and Helmer, within 2 years of each other in the late 1920s. They were done in a Art Deco, Neo-Romanesque style, and are very notable. To the north of the site, and we'll talk about this right now, is the sort of the namesake of the district, which is the BAM complex with Fisher, the main building, and also next to it is the Brooklyn Music School. So the site, the block that the site sits on, is really tremendous, a wonderful, unique place. It has this great collection of civic and arts institutions, Brooklyn Academy of Music, as I mentioned, BAM Fisher, Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower with its wonderful ecclesiastical banking hall, the Brooklyn Music School. Just to the north of our site and just to the south of our site is the Hanson Place Church. It was very important to us in the proposal that we continued that use and scale pattern along the west side of St. Felix, BAM, Brooklyn Music School. The Brooklyn Music School expansion will be the first 2 floors of the site, and of course, One Hanson Church, the Hanson Place Church. The history of the site really, as it's transformed from a brownstone block with actually the previous iteration of the Hanson Place Church. By 1915, BAM was in place. Between 1915 and 1939, saw all of the major transportation infrastructure improvements on either side of the block, which basically led to the development of the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower, the Salvation Army. Of course, BAM was already there. The Brooklyn Music School, which was a combination of these 4 houses, and a new Hanson Place Church. The subway construction itself undermined the church, and you'll see that in a photograph in a second. And then finally, by 1950, you have the current state with the 4 brownstones townhouses that had been demolished. So on the left, you can see the construction of the BMT in the street bed of St. Felix. That is the development site. That is the former church. And on the right side, you see the assemblage of townhouses that became Brooklyn Music School and our development site. This is important. I call, these buildings around, these Art Deco buildings around the Long Island Railroad Terminal, the original transit-oriented development. This was very much part of the development of these buildings, One Hanson Place in the middle and 67 both in the district. They were really built as a result and in response to the increased transportation. And this article, which was from the Brooklyn Eagle in Sunday, March 23rd, 1930, basically said, R.M. Dinsmore, who was the famous realtor, said, the neighborhood around the Williamsburg Savings Bank at Hanson Place is destined to become a section of skyscrapers. And really, this is that's what that is all about. This drawing, lo and behold, 90 years later, is the result of that transportation infrastructure. Most of these, of course, are outside the district, but it's worth noting for background that this drawing from the 2 bridges up to the park with Barclays and the proposed building in here and One Hanson. Not surprising given the transportation infrastructure. The rezoning, this is subject to a rezoning. There will be a ULURP later on this year. We have been in discussions with city planning over several years. They are supportive. Basically, the rationale behind the rezoning is to create density to allow for development in the development parcel. One Hanson is significantly overbuilt. Nothing could be built without the rezoning. Its density as a transit-rich location is true today as it was 90 years ago. Provide home ownership, affordable home ownership through MIH, as Brian already mentioned. And Shelby will talk about the importance to the Brooklyn Music School. This is the rezoning proposed, really expanding 2 adjacent districts. And I'm happy to get into any details you want, but the high level summary is that the rezoning will eliminate the overbuilt nonconformance of One Hanson Place and allow for 151,000 zoning square feet to be constructed on the site. The design proposal, with that background, 3 things drove our thinking. One, create an ensemble with the church and One Hanson. These were 2 buildings designed very close to each other by the same architect in the district. We think that this building, the proposed building, should be the 3rd in a trio. and that it should make a scale transition between the two existing buildings. It should reference the materiality and the take stylistic cues from those two buildings, and really, but of course in a modern idiom. Secondly, create and establish continue the appropriate scale along St. Felix on the west side, and also continue the civic and cultural use. And finally, there's a prominent lot line facade, and treating that appropriately as well. So those were the three things that drove our thinking. The next series of slides will show you how we masked the building. St. Felix Street is in the foreground, Hanson Place, the church, Brooklyn Music School. First move was to put 2 floors of the music school extension to fill out the block, except for the yellow is the entrance to the residential building. Above this, approximately 30 feet, aligning closely with the side aisles of the church and the cornice line of Brooklyn Music School, a setback 15 feet from the street wall for the first residential floors, and then again setting back further above the 7th floor, allowing for that one Hanson view easement heading east. And then this view on the right is actually from Ashland, and we've set back 48 feet to preserve this set of windows and expose as much of the north wall of One Hanson Place. That also creates a lower scale, low rise piece adjacent to the former Salvation Army headquarters, the Salvation Army building on Ashland. As the building tapers up, rises, it tapers back, creating a slot and a separation between the two buildings, so that this building is read as independently and not seen as an addition to One Hanson Place. And from the northwest, again on the St. Felix side, continuing the massing and the tapering up to create a graceful form. The result of this is a truncated L-shaped plan with Ashland on the left and St. Felix on the right. The gray mass here is the north side of One Hanson Place. It accommodates the view easement, wraps around, and allows for the view from the windows on the north side of St. Felix. Next slide. So this is the general massing in context. And again, this was to show basically a stepping stone of 3. And we then thought, how do we really create a relationship amongst these 3 buildings so that they each have their own identity, but yet hang together? And as we got more into it, we really had a reading of the site of really being 2 very distinct material color palettes. One is established by One Hanson, and also BAM and BMS, which is sort of in the limestone tan masonry mode. And then the other is the sort of established by by the Hanson Place Church in the brownstone brick mode, and really merging the 2 of those and thinking about how that, applying that to the proposed building. We are proposing here an ombre or a fade between the lighter color at the bottom and the darker color at the top, so that the 3 hang together as a composition, but that when the proposed building hits the ground, it has a distinct identity vis-a-vis the church, and when it meets the sky, it has a distinct identity vis-a-vis One Hanson Place. It also has the advantage of expanding the Brooklyn Music School identity and creating a more coherent front for that along St. Felix. We also look very carefully at the architecture of One Hanson Place. This building was designed in the first decade after the 1916 zoning with a height and setback zoning with those famous Hugh Ferris drawings, and all Art Deco high-rise architects were immersed in how to create an architecture out of these constraints. So you'll see multiple setbacks in plan and in elevation, and also a vertical striation, and in this case with a strong A-B rhythm, which is something we picked up on. So in terms of the Part T of the project, or the basic organizational arrangement, they're really the east and west walls, which are vertical piers, sometimes denser, sometimes lighter, or sometimes in the A-B rhythm, but a very consistent vertical pier arrangement, and then a more subdued planar arrangement on the south and north. Some inspiration and precedent images for those for the east and west walls. You have, picking up on the Art Deco vertical striation of, let's say, nearest Rock Center. This is our building Sky House in the mid-20s with the vertical masonry striation, and really combining those two. And then the side wall, the north and south walls, a bas relief in brick and smaller punched windows. I would say that we look to these prominent lot line conditions where, let's say at 212 Fifth, where you have a more articulated street wall, and a more subdued lot line wall, but yet it is still dressed and composed carefully, and that was part of the inspiration. When we get to the base of the building, deeply set back glass, so you generally see these facades obliquely as you're walking down the street, so presenting masonry to the pedestrian, and a scalloped terracotta spandrel. So here it is in situ, in a watercolor. I'll get into photorealistic drawings in a moment. But basically you can see the scale transition between the three buildings a little closer. The St. Felix continuation of Brooklyn Music School, the contrast with the church, gradually getting more redder as you go higher and browner as you go higher. The vertical piers going from a regular rhythm to an A-B rhythm to a thinner regular rhythm. The south and north wall being planar and having a textural relationship, a bas relief between that and the side of One Hanson, and this gap that we've developed to really pull the two buildings away from each other. That and the color contrast really create individual identities as they reach the sky. So quickly around a series of elevations, Ashland, current conditions and proposed conditions with the base, the 48-foot setback, and then tiering, setting back further as it rises. This is the shoulder of One Hanson, the upper part is cut off, and you can see we are not exceeding that. This is the BAM frontage today and proposed. Here you can see the result of setting the building back so far allows this north facade of One Hanson to remain as exposed as possible. St. Felix proposed, the base picking up on the side aisle scale and the cornice scale of the Brooklyn Music School, and then tiering back. Here you can see the setback for the view easement from One Hanson, and then continuing to set back. And then finally, the south elevation, the church and One Hanson on the left, with the south facing part of the leg of that L facing south, and then the court wall coming to the left of it. So that similar view now in contextual photorealistic views. This is Flatbush looking north, a little bit of Barclays, today's condition, and proposed that same south facing core wall and the bay over the church. Now the next three are quite interesting. They're 4th Avenue, looking at One Hanson from the Gowanus side, from the center of the street, from the Park Slope side, and we cannot find a view that really you can see the proposed building. The One Hanson Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower massing basically blocks it, which is important. This is the iconic view of the building. From Ashland looking north, BAM, Theater for New Audience, today, and setting back, proposed. I think this is in a way proof of concept where the Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower is really remains primarily exposed, especially at the top, and no confusion between the new and existing. And then finally on Hanson Place, today and proposed with the you can start to see the ombre working backwards. A few other views, and then we'll get into the closer in street views. Flatbush today and proposed. It's sort of sneaking back here, that level. So getting to the base along St. Felix. A couple more befores and afters. This is looking north, row of 3 to 4 story houses with stoops on the east. The church with its strong buttressing on the west, Brooklyn Music School and BAM heading to the north, and the development site. Here's the proposal with approximately a 33-foot high street wall, the residential entrance, and I think it's clear from the other side, same view but looking south, same position on the street but looking south. You're on the east side of St. Felix, the stoops, the Brooklyn Music School, the development site of the church, and then proposed here. I think you can really see the effect of the 15-foot setback and its relationship to establishing the scale of the street wall. Two things here. One is that the street wall of the proposed building is basically at the same plane at the lot line with the church. Since the music school was originally townhouses or row houses with stoops that were, when they were renovated in the teens, were cut off. Basically, the entrance to the school makes a transition between that 7-foot setback. The second thing is we have taken this sort of vertical window pattern and applied it on the street wall so that there's really a direct relationship as well as the coloration. Here you can see the elevation, basically the residential entrance, the vertical piers, and to the right, the Brooklyn Music School entrance. Looking up, one of the things we did to really continue the sort of more civic and cultural scale and detailing is to create a terracotta spandrel that has this scalloped form that really adds to a sense of, I think, craft and monumentality. On Ashland, excuse me, there's basically a preferred proposal and a secondary proposal. They really have to do with the reason there are two is that there really has to do with the technical and logistical issues surrounding the easements, the egress easements, and the emergency generator easements. Our preferred option is or base case option is the one on the left, which basically is a 2-story piece on Ashland that has an entrance to the Brooklyn Music School. The second floor is Brooklyn Music School. The loading docks for One Hanson Place and the egress from One Hanson Place. In this case, the emergency generators are located with the rest of the mechanical equipment. If that is not possible, we will maintain the existing loading, the existing egress, and the existing emergency generators behind a screen wall that's treated very architecturally, which is on the right. So now I'll show you some renderings of that. This is Ashland Place. Current conditions, you can see the generator here, One Hanson, and of course, Bam Fisher. This is the preferred option with the vertical piers, well-proportioned glass windows, and then the scalloped terracotta spandrels, the segmented loading dock doors here, and the entrance to BAM. If that is not possible for logistics, we will create a lower rise version of that, which should be thought of essentially as a screen wall. The other side, looking the opposite direction, Bam Fisher with the setback, the base of One Hanson in the preferred scheme with the second floor of the Brooklyn Music School, the entrance and loading dock, and the fallback scheme. Finally, I just wanted to talk briefly about materiality and detailing. We spent a lot of time crafting this transition of color, this ombre, if you will, from light to dark. There are 8 brick colors, all a wire cut Norman brick and well spaced. All these are from one manufacturer, well spaced from a color tone point of view to get an even fade. I will get into the coursing of that in a minute. At the base of the building where they meet the ground is limestone with a granite shoe. The glazed terracotta would be in a bisque color, a perforated or painted aluminum in a sort of champagne color. And then finally, a neutral glass with a energy coating and a medium dark painted metal for the windows. So we spent a lot of time coursing this building. Above the base, there are only 1,285 courses. I don't know how many are in the base, but the idea is that the base is the solid light color, the top is a solid brown color, and there are 7 zones of transition between them. And each transition has 2 colors, a lighter and a darker, and the courses get progressively darker as you go up, and then until you get to the next lift, and then you start with the next color, and it feathers in. Here you can see some of how that detailing plays out, where you see some of that striping of the coursing of the brick as the different colors feather in. Basically, this is the middle of the tower with an A-B rhythm, a very clean masonry pier in a vertical arrangement, obviously with a deeply reset glass so that when you see it obliquely again, you have an impression of masonry. At the side wall, at the north and south walls, the lot line walls, a more subdued version of that, but with a bas relief of 4 inches of depth, recreating some windows. And at the top of the building, a narrowing of the piers, all in the dark brown color with a metal painted metal screen infill for the louvers, a louver grill. So before I turn it over to Shelby, I just want to conclude and summarize about the design proposal. One, we believe it's scaled appropriately to the historic district. This is a historic district with high-rise buildings in it. There's One Hanson is 41 stories, 67 is 15 stories. At 24 stories, we're less than half of that average. We also are at the shoulder of the One Hanson Place, so it basically maintains the iconic portion of the tower. Secondly, we believe that the tower is massed appropriately with its vocabulary of Art Deco inspired setbacks that are deployed to maintain the scale of the civic scale of St. Felix, and also to expose the north end of One Hanson and create a pleasing taper on the skyline. And third, we believe that the architectural vocabulary is appropriate in that it has a modern recall of direct reference to these Art Deco towers that were really vertically striated. It is carefully balanced between masonry and glass, where glass is judiciously used and masonry is carefully crafted. So with that, I really thank you for your time. I will leave the slide up and I will turn it over to Shelby Green, who's the chair of the Brooklyn Music School Board. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as you're switching speakers, I want to note for the record that Michael Goldblum has joined us. He joined us early on in the presentation and has been here for the presentation.
Well, thank you. As you know, the Brooklyn Music School factored prominently in the designation of the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. In 1978, when the designation was made, the commission noted that the quiet charm and 19th century ambiance of the side streets of the area had been rediscovered, and major restoration and renovation was taking place on St. Felix Street. That the revival of St. Felix Street was symbolic of this regeneration taking place in so many of the city's historic neighborhoods. Nevertheless, the cultural institutions within the district continue to serve the community and give it vitality. Specifically, the report noted that one of those vital cultural institutions, the Brooklyn Music School, located on St. Felix Street, encouraged the appreciation of music through study, practice, and performance. The report noted that the varied curriculum that included lessons in music theory, dance, voice, and theater classes, as well as private music instruction for children and adults at all levels of skill. It went on to say that scholarships had been available since the school's founding for blind or otherwise handicapped students. That mission to provide music instruction to all irrespective of origin or means has not changed over the last 110 years. The school continues its role as an anchor in the district, a place where aspiring and accomplished artists gather to learn and share experiences and knowledge. The school offers instruction in all music genres, from hip hop to African drumming to opera. The student body, faculty, staff, and in fact, the Board of Trustees reflects the mixed income and ethnic demographics of the community. 90% of its more than 6,000 students receive music instruction at no or reduced cost, and more than 60% of its students are at or below the poverty line. And more than 60% of students identify as people of color. And while the school's mission has not changed over the years, the physical facts of its existence has. It has long outgrown the present facilities, which has, as the designation report notes, consist of 4 row houses constructed more than a century ago. The student body has steadily grown over the years, in fact, by more than 27% in the last 3 years. Originally designed as homes, the current facility lacked the trappings and infrastructure for modern arts instruction. The planned building will mean more than doubling the existing space, the installation of state-of-the-art equipment and room design, including space for a digital music lab, more dance and rehearsal space, and easier accessibility by persons of all abilities. As the renderings you've just seen reflect a style very much sympathetic to the noted varied architectural aspects of the structures existing at the time of the designation, from window design to the tiered levels of the structure as the structure rises, as well as to the colors that are reminiscent of the celebrated structure in the district, that is the Williamsburg Savings Bank building. It will be in keeping with those aesthetics that underlie the designation. I note that in its conclusion in the designation report, the commission found that among its important qualities, the district contained a number of the city's major financial, cultural, and religious institutions that added distinction and contributed to the architectural quality of the area. The proposed building, as planned, will serve to enable BMS to continue that role in the community, as well as to enhance the district's character, considered an attractive example of the mid-19th century Brooklyn neighborhood. But it will be one that offers the prospect of ownership of well-designed, aesthetically pleasing homes with all the modern amenities. So we ask that you support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the conclusion of your presentation now?
Yeah, yes, it is. Thank you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. All right. I see we have some questions, so we'll take some questions from commissioners and then we'll go to the public testimony. Commissioner Commissioner Goldblum, go ahead.
Hi. And forgive me if you went over this. I don't think I heard it. First of all, Why, I know that there was a light and air easement that created a certain limitation on one side, but as it abuts the back of the One Hanson Place building, your easement drawing shows a number of vertically oriented easements, but nothing kind of, no light and air kind of easements that would prevent you from building up against or kind of against that building. Why did you choose to propose to on the Flatbush Avenue side?
Thank you for your question. Let me just go back to the plan. I think there are several reasons for this. I believe first and foremost, let me just go to there was a good plan of this, just bear with me. Yeah. Just to recap the question. This is One Hanson. This is the plan of the tower, Ashland, St. Felix. Building is set back 15-20, and then it tapers back a few 10 more feet. Here it's 48 feet. So it's located, so let's say closer to St. Felix. As you are correct in pointing out, the One Hanson, this is actually the official easement. This is something we chose to respect. The feeling severalfold. One is really to preserve this side of the building, and to create that top to bottom view of the building, and secondarily, we are able to use the light and air over the Brooklyn Music School for windows. We are not allowed to do that over the adjacent lot. Sliding the building to the west would really create a lot of dark, unusable space. We also believe that we have greatly, let me just go to the rendering. We also believe that we've really taken great care in terms of crafting the setbacks on St. Felix to respect the scale of that street. Here, this to me is our first point, which is, today and proposed that really allow this side of the building to shine and remain, uncovered, and on the setbacks and terracing on the St. Felix side really established the lower scale.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have Commissioner Jefferson. Please go ahead.
On picking up on that issue of the overlap, the Hanson Place building is a significant formal element in Brooklyn. And I'm wondering why have it overlap at all? Why, from this view, for example, you have your building overlapping it. Why not have space between your building and this beautiful, elegant, significant building so that there's space around it, and we can see it? As you go back to the original photo, the existing, that we could have that view, and you could have your building also with the space around it. We could have this view.
So I think these two questions encapsulate the push and pull of the site pressures. So where is the balance between the Ashland Place, maintaining this object and condition, as well as maintaining the scale of St. Felix Place, which I'll go to the. Sorry. Oh, sorry, it's bouncing around. Just bear with. So pushing the tower any closer to this side, in our view, would be too much mass on that street. So the sort of mid-block but biased towards St. Felix was the most satisfactory balance.
The other question I had was had to do with the significance of having it aligned with the shoulder of Hanson Street. I mean, I see this as a dominant, you have a dominant significant building, and then you have a subordinate building that you're putting in, subordinate to the dominant building. And at the same time, you have this kind of, you're aligning though, to say, I'm equal at this point. Why not, why was the alignment important as opposed to say disalignment?
Yes, good question. So I think it's worth noting that the alignment was less important to us than not exceeding the shoulder and really allowing the top of this to, the top of the tower to sort of be free of view encumbrances. The second thing is the top of this building is not completely a flat top. The planes stick up 2.5, 3 feet. There's a sort of tapering of the piers at the top. So there's a softening, and finally the gap itself. So the idea is that there's it's not I guess the last thing I should say is there's no really strong like shoulder line here. I think further back you can see it. So this also moves up and down. So it's really in the zone of that shoulder. There's no definite alignment. But really the short answer is we really did not want to exceed the height of that to block any of the view of the top of it.
And thirdly, I think you did a really nice job at the elevations, and I think it's a well-designed project.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Are there other questions from commissioners? Okay. Not seeing any hands raised, I think we should move to public testimony. So we have a number of people who signed up to speak, and I believe we may have more people in the meeting who are present who would like to speak. So we will start with the people who signed in and then work toward getting everybody who's in the meeting. So if you're in the meeting and you would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And again, we'll start with the sign-in sheets and then get to everybody. And I'll now turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Kersavage, to manage the speakers.
Okay, and I will be bringing each speaker into the room to be a panelist when they testify. And we'll go through the sign-in sheet and start with Regina Meyer. And Regina, I have brought you in. And you should be able to unmute yourself. And if you could just state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Chair Carol and Executive Director Kersavage. I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon. My name is Regina Meyer, President of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. On behalf of DBP, I'd like to express our strong support for both the Brooklyn Music School and Gotham Organization's proposal on St. Felix Place. With a design that's sensitive to the heritage of the Williamsburg Savings Bank, the project will bring new cultural space and affordable housing to downtown Brooklyn, and it'll be an outstanding addition to the historic district overall. Complementing the cultural district's legacy of blending civic institutions with residential density, the FX collaborative design will transform a vacant lot and function to connect disparate building forms along both Ashland Place and St. Felix. Echoing the Art Deco influences of its neighbors, the building exhibits attributes of verticality and pronounced setbacks as it ascends. The overall height of the building is appropriate to the iconic bank building, being limited to the bank's shoulders, thus preserving the historic tower's beloved presence in all of downtown Brooklyn, and transitioning to the lower scale of both BAM and the St. Felix Street buildings. In addition, with entrances and lobbies on both streets, the music school and housing uses activate both sides of the block and enhance the streetscapes adjacent to them. It's also worth noting that beyond the addition of affordable housing, the new space will allow the Brooklyn Music School to undertake an long overdue renovation to its existing facility while maintaining their important services to the community. The fact that it achieves these functions with thoughtful design recommends the project ever more so, and I urge you to support the proposal, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Next person we'll bring in from the sign-in sheet, Sarah Najami. Okay, Sarah, you should be able to just unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi there. Thanks for allowing me to speak. My name is Sarah Najumi, and I would like to express my support for the Brooklyn Music Schools and the Gotham organization's proposed 130th Street St. Felix Street project. The proposed building was designed nicely and visually fits well within the neighborhood. Additionally, the project will allow for the expansion of the Brooklyn Music School's instructional space, for the creation of a digital musical lab, and for general renovations. Sorry, I didn't have my video on. Here you go. The Brooklyn Music School has always succeeded in providing students from different neighborhoods and backgrounds with access to a quality music education. Though my family lives in Bed-Stuy, the Brooklyn Music School has gone great lengths to ensure that this is the case for my children as well. I have 2 children who both play multiple instruments, and the instruction they receive at Brooklyn Music School has been invaluable to them. The Brooklyn Music School's commitment to accessibility can be seen in other elements of this project as well. For instance, the proposed renovations will increase the school's accessibility for students and visitors of all abilities. Additionally, the proposed residential units will promote diversity, access, and inclusion through the creation of income-restricted affordable home ownership opportunities. Of course, home ownership is much more beneficial to a community than rental units. I'm expressing my support, and I thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have John Napiza. Okay, John, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is John Apisa with the Association for a Better New York. Thank you for allowing me to testify regarding 130 St. Felix Street. The Association for a Better New York is a nearly 50-year-old civic organization representing corporations, nonprofits, educational, cultural, and health institutions, unions, and government authorities dedicated to promoting connections between the public and private sectors of New York City. We would like to express our support for the proposal to develop 130 Felix Street into a mixed-use cultural center that will provide affordable homeownership opportunities for local residents, expand and enhance the beloved Brooklyn Music School, and improve and revitalize the overall streetscape. ABNY believes that the expanding the current lot and rezoning the location to allow for affordable homeownership and infill development to create density at a transit-oriented location will secure a thriving future for this historic district, and that by including the extension of BMS in the plans, acknowledges and celebrates the cultural and civic traditions of the area. The public-private partnership between BMS and the Gotham organization will respect the character, scale, and style of the surrounding buildings in the neighborhood. The setback at the base of the development maintains reverence to One Hanson Place and keeps scale with Central United Church. By acknowledging and incorporating the Art Deco and Neo-Romanesque styles of One Hanson in the church, and by incorporating a brick color palette related to its neighbors, this new development will create harmony on the streetscape. The partnership acknowledges and understands Brooklyn's diverse community and blossoming artistic scene, and they seek to improve the downtown Brooklyn Cultural District to preserve these ideals for future Brooklynites. By transforming what is currently a private parking lot into a vibrant mixed-use facility, BMS and Gotham will achieve just that. and fill in a noticeable gap and lack of consistency in the streetscape. The development also creates continuity on Ashland Place by including BMS presence on the block, along with existing Brooklyn Academy of Music cultural venues. We appreciate the focus of BMS and Gotham on accessibility for a diverse group of music and art students, many who will receive beneficial programming from BMS at reduced or no cost. With the current facility for BMS near capacity, it is critical that this project move forward to expand instruction and the essential services BMS provides to a local community. It is important to note that the housing component of this project designates 30% of all units as affordable, helping families to establish roots in the neighborhood. All residents will be able to enjoy the building's amenities, and all homeowners will share the same front entrance access points. ABNY applauds the vision and cultural commitment of the plan for 130 St. Felix Street to facilitate infill development, to create density at a transit-rich location, to allow for affordable housing development, to expand BMS, and to respectfully complete and complement the area streetscape. ABNY appreciates the opportunity to testify this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Charles Cohen. So Charles, you should be able to unmute yourself and please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello.
Hi, Charles. We can hear you. Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
All right, my name is Charles Cohen, and I'd like to read something. Appropriateness is the quality of being suitable or right for the particular situation. The goal of landmarks law is to preserve the aesthetically and historically important buildings and structure that make up the New York City vista. The commission preserves not only architectural significant buildings, but the overall historic sense of a place of neighborhoods that are designated as historic districts. Historic districts are regions with buildings that fit the individual landmark criteria and contain architectural and historical significance. Landmark districts must also be geographically cohesive with a coherent streetscape and sense of place. The Landmarks Preservation Commission is responsible for protecting New York City's architecturally, historical, and culturally significant buildings and sites by granting them landmark or historic district status and regulating them once they are designated. The landmark hearings is about appropriateness, not about tenancy of this project and the appropriateness of the project within the BAM Historic District. Gotham proposed project does not meet these landmark criteria for appropriateness individually or part of the historic district. LPC on 3 separate occasions gave protection to this area. The Williamsburg Savings Bank building in 1977, the entire BAM Historic District in 78, and the application to build 17 stories on Van Fisher, 230 Ashland, was rejected in 2007. The property abuts Gotham's development. These decisions and past landmark must be respected as precedents for the preservation of the BAM Historic District. They are significant per their appropriateness as precedents. 130 St. Felix project is not appropriate. It is not appropriate architecturally, historically, or culturally. It is not appropriate within the historic district. Where other buildings in the subject block of BAM have topped out at 100 feet, the proposed tower would be 285 feet. Remembering their neighbor, BAM Fisher was prohibited by landmarks, from building higher than 100 feet in 2007 because it was not appropriate. The CB2 hearings about appropriateness of this development was hardly mentioned. Gotham constantly went off topic, as it has here. The entire hearing is centered on occupancy and not appropriateness. This hearing is about appropriateness, only appropriateness, nothing else. The commission should reject this proposal in entirety to the landmarks law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Lucy Coteen. And Lucy, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hang on. Okay. Camera should be on. Okay. Hi. Thank you. Good afternoon. Before I begin, I would like to know that you have read all the testimony that has been submitted on this issue. I know that there has been quite a few testimonies submitted. Please read the testimony that I submitted. I don't want to repeat it for time. To add to my written testimony, I want to say that I hope you are as dismayed as I am by the deceptive presentation of the street view by Gotham. Gotham's presentation takes great care to focus the views towards the many new high-rises on Flatbush Avenue and the nearby streets, and away from the 3- and 4-story historic townhouses on the other side of the street, and away from the landmarked area of Fort Greene. Please see the submission by Michael Gruen, president of City Club, showing the aerial view from the northwest to see the proper perspective of the proposed building in relationship to the historic 1 Hanson Place or Williamsburg Bank building. He points out that in the 85-page visual presentation of 130 St. Felix Street, no image reveals the blocked view of 1 Hanson Place from the northwest. Furthermore, in Gotham's street presentation looking towards BAM, the view gives a false perspective on the height of the historic BAM building, which is roughly the equivalent of a 5-story building. It appears much taller in their presentation. The Landmark Commission's job is not to evaluate political issues such as possible affordable housing or benefits to a music school that happens to be on the block. It is to assess the appropriateness of a structure to a landmark district and as to whether it enhances the historic value of the district. In my 43 years of living in Fort Greene, I have always considered St. Felix Street as one of the most precious blocks in the historic Fort Greene area. It is a narrow street with 19th century townhouses on one side of the street, and across the street it is framed by the magnificent Brooklyn Academy of Music at one end of the block and the historic Central United Church at the other end of the block. It is clear that the intrusion of this 24-story modern building has no place in the preservation of history. In 1978, this commission had the wisdom to protect Fort Greene. Do not undo the effects of the dedicated residents who have carefully maintained and preserved their buildings to reflect their history. This block is a prime example of conscientious preservation. Anyone who has renovated a historic building knows that is no easy task. The residents of St. Felix have not been consulted with. Do not allow the unraveling of that protection. Please reject this incursion into historic Fort Greene. And just want to add, just now while listening before to the developer, I heard the frequently used words of the NIMBY insult thrown in, saying that there are people who want no change or nothing built, inferring that people who do not want to see the diminution of light and air and the casting of shadows where there was once light are not trivial concerns. These are basic human health rights and rights to the preservation, to keep the preservation of this neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Susan Spiller. And Susan, I've promoted you to a panelist. You can turn on your camera if you like and unmute yourself.
Mute.
Susan, okay, great. Hi, we can hear you. Please state your name for the record and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Susan Spiller. I will read part of the testimony of Michael Gruen, president of the prestigious City Club of New York. It's surely no surprise to sense concern about proposed changes in a landmark or historic district, but red alert alarms are stunning. This is a red alert case because the unequivocally inappropriate concept of appropriateness that applicant presents. Where other buildings in the subject block of the BAM historic top out at about 100 feet, except the Savings Bank, which was separately designated in '78 and occupies a corner, not a central area of the district, the proposed tower would rise to 285 feet. Where the bank, a building which from all sides merits landmark status on its own, is adjacent to the new structure, the latter would significantly block its view. Not a single page of the 85-page visual presentation of the 130 St. Felix Gotham Development hearing submission illustrates this blockage. Where St. Felix Street now presents a gradual and relatively comfortable gentle rise in height as one's view shifts from the row houses on the east side of the street to the relatively uniform increase in height of the subject block across the street, then to the bank and the beginning of downtown, that gentle progression is wiped out by the stark tower almost 3 times the height of surrounding buildings, 3 times, to be built on the western side of St. Felix Street. The Commission's raison d'etre is to protect landmarks and historic districts. The law is carefully written to require the Commission to make its decisions strictly on the basis of what is appropriate for the preservation of the landmark or district at issue. Thus, it is expressly precluded from addressing zoning issues. Its job to determine whether a proposal is appropriate in terms of preservation standards, not on the basis that the developer would like to exploit every inch of FAR the zoning allows and to arrange some upzoning to add still more FAR. Here, the proposed new building is not only illegal under present law, but authorizing it is proposed on the basis, totally irrelevant under the landmarks law, that it will provide some housing, additional space for the music school, and the owner wants to do it. So the Commission is asked to rule on political issues rather than design issues. Amidst all this is the implication that concerns for stemming the irreplaceable loss to the people of the city of the aesthetic, cultural, historic values represented by such improvements of districts, which represent or reflect elements of the city's cultural, social, economic, political, and architectural history, are irrelevant. But these issues, in fact, are not only relevant, but exclusively relevant. The Commission has in the past promoted these interests prescribed by Section 25301 with steadfast conscientiousness. This application compels the same. We respectfully submit that the LPC must reject the proposed new building as inappropriate for this historic district and contrary to the intent of the landmarks law. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, Samara Karasik, and I don't see that name. If you're on the phone and you have your hand raised, I will come back and call you. But let's move on to Colin Haywood. And Colin, I'm promoting you to a panelist, and you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Colin Haywood. Members of the Landmark Preservation Commission. My name is Colin Haywood, and I'm writing to express my support for the Brooklyn Music School proposed 130 St. Felix Street project. For 9 years, the Brooklyn Music School has been a second home for my son. Between piano classes and jazz band, his time at the school has been valuable from a music education standpoint, and also for the sense of community that he and his peers felt while practicing and performing there. While my son is graduating this year and will soon be attending college, my support for the Brooklyn Music School remains. That's in part why I support this project, which will allow the school to more than double its instructional space, to add new dance and rehearsal space, a digital music lab, undergo much needed renovations, and enhance accessibility. This expansion is critical if the school is to continue providing students with quality programming for years to come. My support also extends to the elements of this project, the income-based affordable housing opportunities that this project will create and are an important piece of making our city more equitable. Additionally, the overall design of the proposed building is clearly thoughtful, and as the proposed building looks like it belongs on St. Felix Street. Again, I would like to offer my support to the Brooklyn Music Schools project that they have brought before you today. Sincerely, Colin Haywood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have Andrea Goldwyn. And Andrea, I've promoted you. I think I might need to bring your phone in too. Okay,
Andrea,
thank you.
Okay, great. So please
Great.
state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good day, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Andrea Goldwyn, speaking on behalf of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. The Conservancy's Public Policy Committee has reviewed this proposal for a new building in the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District and is pleased to support it. The committee thanks the project team for their clear and thorough presentation. They've taken inspiration from adjacent buildings to create a design that will be appropriate for this historic district. The BAM district encompasses several distinct characters: residential, institutional, and commercial. The proposed building will stand at the intersection of all three and serve as a fine transition point. At the street level on St. Felix, the facade aligns with the Brooklyn Music School and refers to the low scale of the school and the houses on the opposite side of the block. At Ashland Street, the two-story option respects the neighboring elevation at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The tower's ombre facade takes its cues from both the Williamsburg Savings Bank and the Handsome Place Central United Methodist Church. The height, which lines up with the bank's setback, makes a clear connection with that building, yet defers to it as one of the district's focal points. The new building's uses, such as increasing space for the music school and creating opportunities for affordable housing ownership, will be a benefit to the community. Thank you for the opportunity to express the Conservancy's views.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And next we have Kelly Carroll from HDC. Okay, Kelly, I brought you in. And yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. This is Kelly Carroll for Historic Districts Council. HDC's Public Review Committee found the proposed new building at 130 St. Felix Street to be a creative, attractive composition with a high quality palette of materials. However, it is in the wrong place. It should be constructed outside of the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. It appears shoehorned into a low-rise street next to an elegant collection of 1850s row houses. It is impossible for a building of this scale to ever have a natural urban relationship with them. While the applicant uses the presence of the Williamsburg Savings Bank as a precedent to build at a skyscraper scale, the bank was designated as an individual landmark in '77, 1 year before the district was designated. Regardless of minutia, the bank is the only skyscraper within the historic district. The presence of a single thing does not equate to being characteristic of a district. If the LPC approves this tower at this location, there will be 2 skyscrapers. And then the argument certainly can be made that skyscrapers are a characteristic of the Brooklyn Academy of Music Historic District. Today, however, there is only 1 skyscraper. The designation report illuminates the character for which this district was designated, as it, quote, reflects the architectural development of Brooklyn's middle-class residential neighborhoods in the late 1850s. The area included within the boundaries of the historic district was built up almost entirely during this period, and it retains much of its original 19th century ambience, end quote. The LPC preserved the low scale of this district in 2007 when commissioners required the Brooklyn Academy of Music Fisher building to be lowered from 170 to 100 feet. More recently, on June 2nd, 2020, commissioners were overwhelmingly expressed discomfort with the tower looming over 1840s row houses in the Gansevoort Market Historic District, despite the thicket of high-rises immediately surrounding them. This proposal is not dissimilar, and we ask for the scale of this district to be preserved. Scale is an inherent characteristic of a neighborhood and falls entirely within the Landmarks Commission's purview. Even if this was an as-of-right development, such distinctions have no force within a designated historic district. Fittingly, the designation report for this district concludes with these words, quote, it is hoped that historic district designation will help to ensure the protection of the area, end quote. We couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, next we have Carol Brown Kelly. And on the phone, I should be able to talk now.
Okay, can the commissioners hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you could just state your name for the record, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my
Yes,
name is
go
Carol
ahead.
Brown Kelly. Yeah, My name is Carol Brown Kelly, and I wrote a letter in order to express my support for Brooklyn Music School's proposed 130 St. Felix Street project. The Brooklyn Music School is a treasured institution in the neighborhood of Fort Greene and has cultivated a true sense of community for years. I have experienced this firsthand. My childhood best friend studied flute at Brooklyn Music School in the late 70s and early 1980s. My son and daughter, now young adults, began years of music and dance instruction, respectively. They started in 2002. My daughter continues to take lessons in voice and musical theater, and I still volunteer at the school events to this day. My children consider Brooklyn Music School their home away from home, and many students and faculty are considered part of their extended family. The Brooklyn Music School must continue to be an amenity for members of our Fort Greene community, but anyone who's been inside the school would absolutely agree with me that it's long overdue for an upgrade. I have watched the demand for arts education grow over the decades since public schools like my children attended experienced budget cuts and changed their priorities. The arts are still so important. However, I see that the school's current capacity has reached its limit, and the facility is showing the strain of years of trying to serve increasing numbers of people in our community who crave enrichment. It would personally be upsetting to me to see children from Fort Greene and surrounding neighborhoods turned away from being exposed to music and dance because there's no room. And that's why I support Brooklyn Music School's expansion plans, which will allow it to more than double its instructional space and add a digital music lab that's essential in 21st century, and improve accessibility and more. The residential area above the proposed expansion of the school also deserves mention. While the physical character of Fort Greene is an unmistakable draw to newcomers and beloved by people like myself who have lived here all our lives, it would be wrong to not point out that to oppose all change in our neighborhood has the unintended consequence of keeping underprivileged individuals from remaining as a part of this community. The 130 St. Felix Street project both enhances the existing neighborhood and brings about accessibility. It provides opportunities for income-based, affordable home ownership in a building that was clearly and successfully designed with the surroundings in mind. And so for these reasons, I support the efforts of the Brooklyn Music School and its partners at Gotham, and ask the commissioners of the LPC to do so as well. So thank you for your time and consideration. I'm Carol Brown Kelly.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. And the last person we have signed up, Semra Urson. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. And I have brought you in. You should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. And if you could just state your name for the record, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Semra Urson. I am the Director of Development at Brooklyn Children's Museum. And I'm also a parent, and I just wanted to quickly reiterate my support. I'd like to express my support for the Brooklyn Music School and the Gotham project at 130 St. Felix Street. My family has been in Fort Greene for well over a decade. All 3 of my children have attended Brooklyn Music School, dance, the band, the after school program, all of these programs which are really providing essential services at affordable rates for parents in this neighborhood and this community. We also consider the music school a home away from home, and we would love for them to have the ability to expand, serve more students, and to have that upgrade in their facility, which is much needed. Those renovations will be able to take place without closing the school altogether, so that there'll be that continuity of instruction for children, mine as well, who still take dance at the school. And so I think that the building design is thoughtful. I think that this is going to create housing for lower income housing for the community, and will allow the music school to expand and continue to do that vital service for the neighborhood. So I think that is, in a nutshell, my support for the project. So thank you for your time, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. So that's everybody that's signed up. I see 2 more hands raised. If anybody else wants to speak, please raise your hand. So I'm going to go through these in order. Maria, bringing you in to speak. You can turn on your camera if you like and unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maria Free, speaking on behalf of the New York Building Congress. NYBC is proud to support the development of 130 St. Felix Street. This project will enable sustained growth for BMS and provide affordable home ownership opportunities. The New York Building Congress has, for almost 100 years, advocated for investment in infrastructure, pursued job creation, and promoted preservation and growth in the New York City area. Our association is made up of over 550 organizations comprised of more than 250,000 professionals. Through our members, events, and various committees, we seek to address the critical issues of the building industry and promote the economic and social advancement of our city and its constituents. Consistent with our organizational mission, 130 St. Felix Street maintains the stability and vitality of downtown Brooklyn Cultural District. BMS is a key piece of the neighborhood, offering affordable access to music and the arts to over 6,000 children, adults, and seniors. With a new facility, BMS can accommodate increasing demand for its programs by more than doubling its instructional space, adding new dance and rehearsal space, and creating a dedicated digital music lab. BMS will also be able to renovate its existing facility while maintaining services at 130 St. Felix. Atop the new center, this project provides permanent affordability in a rapidly changing historic neighborhood. The development sets aside approximately 120 units for homeowners at 70 to 100% AMI and limits common charges. These financial measures enable residents to establish lasting roots in the community and help ensure the district remains accessible for future generations. This development also appropriately fits into the mixed civic and residential character of the neighborhood. Referencing the Art Deco and Neo-Romanesque styles of nearby buildings, the structure will fill in an empty lot and, without overwhelming one hands in, complete the historic block. In closing, 130 St. Felix Street is an opportunity to grow downtown Brooklyn's anchor institutions, provide an affordable future, and enhance architectural continuity. The Building Congress strongly supports this project, and we welcome you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the last hand I see is Christabel Goff. Christabel, if you want to turn on your camera, you can, and also unmute yourself. Oops. We had you unmuted for a second. There we go. Christabel, can you hear? Oops. You're muted one more time. There we go. Christabel, can you hear me? Christabel, it looks like you're unmuted and you should be able to speak. I think we've got Christabel muted again. Christabel, I'm going to unmute you, see if that works. Okay. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear you, Christabel.
Christabel, there's also a phone number that you can call into that might be helpful, where you would hit *9 to unmute yourself, raise your hand.
Okay, well, as we're waiting, if anybody else wants to speak, oh, here, I see one more hand. I see a couple hands raised, actually. Maybe one of these is Christabel. Hello, on the phone.
Hello.
Oh, there you are, Christabel.
Can you hear me? Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm so sorry to be inept. So this is Christabel Goff from the Society for the Architecture of the City. It was to be expected that entrepreneurs would take advantage of the present crisis to harvest LPC approvals that will remain valid for 6 years and are extendable beyond that into a future that no one can forecast, when the city may have become a very different place. Now, in a time of crisis, serious distractions abound. News coverage is at an all-time low for landmarks issues, and at the agency, public comment faces amazing technical hurdles, as you may have seen with me. However, thank you. Possibly, the new building proposed for 130 St. Felix Street is financially and logistically infeasible to build immediately, a procedural placeholder that might never be built in its present form. That does nothing to mitigate the harm it can do on the level of a regulatory precedent. In architectural style, instead of offering a new vision for the space, the proposed design offers a crude visual contrast to everything around it. In massing, it violates the scale of the historic district where it would stand, while defacing and obscuring the individual landmark it abuts. We may reasonably assume that the Brooklyn Academy Music District and the adjacent individually landmarked Williamsburg Savings Bank were designated separately in recognition of a dramatically contrasting disparity of scale, preserving a striking moment in New York's architectural history when, in 1927, this massive single skyscraper changed the face of Brooklyn. Infill at 24 stories, in the district beside it, ruins any memory of that historic architectural drama, so carefully preserved through years of bipartite landmark regulation, masked by an unrealized benefit to a nonprofit institution, and a fractional provision of housing affordable for some, though not for those who need it most. The applicant is proposing a building alien to its surroundings and antithetical to the most basic concepts of scale, style, and context in landmarks preservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christabel. Okay. I think the last person we have is, oh, sorry, Sandy. Actually, I'm going to promote you to a panelist, Sandy. You just need to unmute yourself, and you can turn on your camera if you choose. Okay, Sandy. Just need to unmute yourself.
Just go ahead. Here, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Bear with me just one moment. Okay, thank you, Chair Carroll and fellow commissioners. Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Rayburn, a 32-year resident of Fort Greene, having moved there when, in spite of the sketchy appearances of this area at the time, anyone could see the wonderfully good bones of the community, the historic streetscape of a well-preserved neighborhood of 19th century homes. On July 11th, 1978, the Landmarks Preservation Commission held a public hearing on this area, which was then proposed as an historic district and which is now in harm's way. I'm here 42 years later to be a witness to the actions you will take as stewards of the Landmarks Law and the commitment as such to protect St. Felix from a project which is nothing less than a 24-story skyscraper that shatters the boundaries and aesthetics of neighborhood character and context. I'm here to challenge your good offices and your badge of honor to a commitment that is hopefully as credible as the paper on which it was written 42 years ago. I'm asking the commission to look toward, to turn around, and to look east into the Fort Greene landmark blocks, not as the self-serving developers would have you do, to compare it to downtown Brooklyn with its sky-shattering skyscrapers. And as residents of more than dismissing nomenclature of stoops, which Gotham uses with indiscretion, we remain beholden to this fight for our historic patrimony. In keeping with this effort and with all due respect, I must address Commissioner Lutfi, who as president of the BAM Local Development Corporation, spearheaded the planning and development of the 16-acre BAM district project where she worked to transform vacant properties adjacent to the Brooklyn Academy of Music into a variety of developments. I would like to have this noted for the record and would hope that the commissioner would recuse herself in spite of her earlier demurral. She is a BAM stakeholder. Why not merely allow a whole block of other 19th century brownstones, landmarked, to be bought up and merged into one zoning lot in order to build another 24-story tall building? Why have historic districts at all, or landmarking? Presumably the commission is not prepared to debate its own demise, but if a line cannot be drawn in this instance, when can it be? Please, I urge you to vote no. Thank you for your time.
Okay. With that, I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, nor anybody else on the list.
Okay, and we will now move to see if there is any other written comments that were submitted, not including ones that we've already heard from today. But before we do that, if there is anyone who wishes to speak who hasn't had a chance to speak, please raise your hand. And now we'll turn to Rich. We did receive a number of letters which were distributed to the commissioners in advance of today. And Rich, if you can let us know how many we've received that have not been represented today.
Sure, that have not been represented today, close to 100, if not over 100 in opposition, and over a dozen letters in support. And in addition, the community board, as previously noted, did recommend approval on the project.
Okay, thank you. And again, those letters, assuming they were all received before yesterday, have been circulated and distributed to the commissioners. Okay, so before we turn back to the applicants, I just would like to turn to our general counsel to talk a little bit about our jurisdiction. There were some issues in the public testimony, and I just want to put that on the record. Some issues that were raised that are outside of our jurisdiction. So Mark, would you just address that quickly?
Sure, yes. I mean, commissioners, I want to remind you, and I'm sure you don't really need reminding, but notwithstanding anyone's particular views on the music school or affordable housing or other social issues or uses, the Landmarks Law really restricts you looking at the impact of proposed work on architectural features of the building, if it's on the building, or on adjacent buildings, if it's within a district. The project is within a district. So in this case, that's what you're looking at. It's an empty lot. you need to be looking at the impact of this proposal, its scale, its massing, its materials, its location, all the usual architectural issues that you've dealt with. Notwithstanding that the music school may benefit or the affordable housing, those are issues that really are not for us to decide. So I would just remind you of that when you're thinking about the project and commenting.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to turn to the applicant team now and ask you if you'd like to respond or address any of the comments that were raised by the public testimony.
This is Dan. Kaplan, FX Collaborative. I'm having trouble getting my video up. Just one second. Oh, yeah. Thank you. No real comments except for I would reiterate that you know, in addition to the One Hanson Place, Williamsburg Savings Bank Tower, which is both an individual landmark and is heavily referenced in the district designation report, is also 67 Hanson, which is 15 stories, and again at the east end of, I'm sorry, the south end of the district, close to transportation, and that those two buildings, along with the church, were really stimulated by the presence and the development of the subway and the Long Island Railroad terminus, and are part and parcel of the historic district. And I go back to the conclusion of my testimony, where we really feel that that's appropriate and what the commission should be looking at in this block. If the site were a block to the east, I understand that we would be in the sort of brownstone core of the district, but we are really at the transportation oriented development zone of the historic district. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions for the applicant? Okay. Not seeing any hands raised, I will have us move toward closing the hearing and beginning our discussion. So Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, so all in favor of closing the hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing is closed, and we will now begin our discussion. And again, I want to just note for the record that Commissioner Bland is recused on this item, and we do have one commissioner absent today, Commissioner Chen, but otherwise everyone is present. And I think, why don't we start at the top of our table with Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank the applicant for a very interesting presentation. And, you know, I appreciate Mark's comments about our scope and those comments of the testimony, the people in testimony who were trying to make that distinction. And I think that in this case, it's a very interesting set of comments. The people who spoke in favor mostly were supporting the project because of its program, whether that's the school or low-income housing. And those who were opposing it were doing so from the point of view of appropriateness. I think that I certainly share the goal of the project, which would support low-income housing. The city's going to have to absorb a lot more low-income housing than we're building now in order for us to fix our many problems that stem from our housing situation. But that is not Landmark's direct mandate. to weigh that against appropriateness. I think that this block is an interesting block. It's an unusual block in that one side is very residential and very relatively uniform, and the other side is very variegated, with BAM at one end, the church at the other. I think that there's a, and then seeing behind it in the backdrop, the dramatic increase in scale along Flatbush Avenue. So I think that there's the possibility of a high-rise element somewhere in that mix, but I think that putting it on this block fails the most basic test of appropriateness in terms of scale, in terms of kind of the urban scale. I don't think that we would naturally feel that a high-rise building on this block would be appropriate in the abstract. I think that the attempt to link it to the Williamsburg Savings Bank building is appropriate, but it's not in the right spot. I mean, the Williamsburg building faces, literally, it faces the other direction. It faces Flatbush Avenue side. All the high rises are on the Flatbush Avenue side. So I think that that in order to preserve the context of the block, one should either limit the St. Felix height to the townhouses that were originally there, or at the very most to BAM, which constitutes a very significant percentage of this side of the block. I think that the setback, in order to align with the main volume of the church, is a nice detail, but it's not necessary. I think that the applicant could take a volume up to the height of the BAM building at the street wall, and that would be an appropriate volume on this block. But I think that the rest of the high rise really has to be pushed back to Ashland Place to face the high rise portion. I think that their sensitivity in keeping the the north facade of the bank building exposed is a misplaced value. I think that facade was always rendered as a party wall or an end wall. It was not designed and developed to the degree that the other facades were. And as a result, I think that the notion of covering it with a structure to a certain extent, as long as the tower is left exposed, I think would be appropriate. And I think that the applicant's concern about lot line windows is somewhat of a self-imposed problem. They've chosen to locate their core in a place where there could be windows right now, and so they've lost, major quantities of potential windows looking south across the roof of the church, where I think they have that as part of their site from a zoning point of view. So I think that if the core were moved to the north face, you could slide the majority of the building's volume to the west and accomplish your laudable civic goals without breaking the scale of this block. In terms of the architecture, I think that the architecture is fine, but I would just say that they should be careful about the detailing and rhythms to make sure that it doesn't look like an addition to the bank building. I think the coloration is effective in that regard, but I'm a little bit worried about the patterning, the vertical kind of neo Art Deco patterning, and the very rigid link of the height to the bank building. You don't want it to look like an addition. You want it to be friendly with it, but it should not look like an addition to it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
Commissioner Goldblum took the words out of my mouth, Sarah. I think that it's the massing, it's the placing of the massing objectionable to me. There is that they end their building, they top off their building at that broad shoulder of the Williamsburg Bank building, I find very troublesome. And And those two sidewalls the two brown sidewalls are much too strong a statement for that building to be melding into the skyline. But I agree with him completely. The massing should be on the other side of this building so that the St. Felix Street scale is maintained. In terms of materiality, I'm fine with the new one and the architectonics.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland is out. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, thanks to both Michaels for starting this discussion, and thank you to the person who spoke, who mentioned the fact that I helped launch with Harvey Lichtenstein the very important BAM Cultural District in this area. I also would like to say that I'm a lifelong New Yorker and Brooklynite. I was born in Brooklyn, and this building, to me, when I was growing up and even today, is kind of like my equivalent in Brooklyn of the Empire State Building. It's sort of the iconic building that I remember looking to sort of center myself within the landscape of Brooklyn, especially within downtown Brooklyn, and where it's positioned right on top of the city's third major mass transportation hub was especially important to me because during my high school years and also later on when I bought my first home, you know, I used to always transfer there. So this is a really important place to, this building and this juncture is important to me in many ways, and the architecture of it is important. And during my days as head of the BAM LDC, you know, the landscape of downtown of Fort Greene, which this is really sort of, this historic district is really connected to, was also quite different and very important. And I want to say that the Brooklyn Music School back then, and as people have said, was a very, very important local, I'm going to say was an arts organization and community organization, always struggling, always in need of a home, and always in need of being helped to expand. And I can see why, you know, there's a lot of things going on here. And I can see why everybody, including my heart, wants the Brooklyn Music School to have the home that it deserves, especially at a time when the neighborhood has continued to evolve and its role within that neighborhood has continued to expand. I do agree that, I also want to say that this, you know, as my fellow commissioner said, you know, the issue of affordable housing is important, and it was a central part of what was going on as part of the master plan in the cultural district. And it's a wonderful thing to bring to the area and every area in New York City. That said, I think we do have to look at this building within the context as we've been, as is our job, within the context of the landmark and the topography of this historic district. Fort Greene Place is a precious street, as somebody said. It's tiny and it is a gem. And the Brooklyn Music School and part of BAM have been part of that street as have all of these little townhouses that people have lovingly restored and maintained, you know, over the years. And I am a little, you know, as both Michael said, I am a little concerned that this project is putting most of its bulk on this little street. Even as it hits the ground, I think its incursion out into the sidewalk seems to be, it seems to disrupt the natural flow, pedestrian flow of the street. And I'm having a little problem with that. And when you look at the view of the massing, as was also pointed out from Ashland Place, you clearly get the sense that the massing could move closer to Ashland. I feel very strongly about that as well. I also feel that the building's too tall. It's too tall for the street, and it's too tall with respect to this landmark building. It shouldn't be rising, you know, up to the shoulder. It shouldn't in any way compete with or get in the way of the majesty of this building, of the Williamsburg Savings Bank building. And if you look at the view, and I can't remember what page it was, from the south, which is the proper view of, you know, to look at this building, you can see that it's just almost hanging on to this proposed project is almost hanging on to the building. I want to see if I can figure out what page this was on, so we could just go to it. Does anybody know? No, that's not it.
Well, Jeannie, maybe if you keep talking with us,
Yeah.
staff can find the page.
So anyway, okay, the other thing I want to raise is that even though I think this concept of the gradation in the use of the masonry is an interesting one, I'm just a little concerned about it. I think it, you know, if this isn't done properly, when it's nice conceptually, but if it's not done properly, it might not look I'm not sure it's going to look that good. And I think the spectrum is too broad, that it should be, that the color range should be reduced in it. I do want to say from a personal perspective that also that, you know, this area is now not only a vibrant residential community, but it is a vibrant arts district. There's at least 40 some odd arts groups that now make their home there as a result of the work that many people have done, including the BAM LDC. And it would be wonderful, and I do hope that the Brooklyn Music School is going to be able to have a home, but I think this project as configured doesn't work. And I also think it's not fair to connect this project to all of the development and the height that happens along Flatbush Avenue in downtown Brooklyn, because that's a different part of the neighborhood. It's not a part of the district, and that's not what we're talking about. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I agree with my fellow commissioners in terms of the site planning, but I have a couple of other comments. One is the singularity of the tower. And whatever they do, whatever they redesign, there should be space around this building. There should be some space. The building should not overlap it. It should make sure that the tower is the dominant thing, not subordinate to the structure. Second, I think the whole idea of making the shoulder the same height of the tower doesn't make any sense to me. I think the whole project has to be reduced in scale. The scale is too tall. I mean, this view, for example, tracks from the tower and this important street. And thirdly, although I like the color, the artistic idea of the color, I think it's too mannerist for this site. I think a simple palette of just one material, one simple elemental thing would just be right. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I think I just can build on what we've heard already. I thank our general counsel for stealing my usual role of pointing out that we are a commission of limited jurisdiction. So I won't repeat that. I think the testimony in opposition, contrary to the applicant's statements, was very much focused on the correct issue, which is to say, I'll just call out 3 examples. Christabel described the building as alien to the district because it ruins the memory of the architectural drama of the contrast between the low scale on St. Felix and the Williamsburg Bank. Kelly Carroll pointed out that it was shoehorned in and was not that the district was not a skyscraper district. And then I think earlier, an individual, Charles Cohen, testified that it ruined or disrupted the historic sense of place. And I think all of that focuses on the issue that Michael Goldblum raised at the beginning, which is the scale and massing and the side of the bank building that appears on. You know, I think it was an interesting rhetorical flourish, this idea of a vertical Nike swoosh. You know, if you look at the low scale building and go through theirs and up to I think it's on page 30 of the presentation. It was intriguing, but I think it ignored the kind of a line that we would draw, which would be across the roof lines on the St. Felix side. And it's a very creative idea. However, the line that is actually goes directly through their building, and while that location could sustain some additional height, I do not think it can sustain this kind of height. I'm not going to go into any of the other details because I think there's such a dramatic change has to go into this that it may affect the rest of the way they design the structure.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thank you. I am in agreement with a lot of the comments that have come before here. I think that what's interesting and complicated here is that the district itself was noted for having, on the one hand, residential parts, which were 3- and 4-story row houses, and on the other hand, institutional buildings, which were much larger, both taller, wider, and in every sense of another scale. And so this complicates a little bit our purview, this question of whether or not we opine at all on use, because what's being proposed here is something that tries to conjure, this is aside from the references they make sort of outside the district or at the limits of the district, that tries to conjure the scale, in a sense, of the institutional buildings, but the programmatic use for the most part is residential, other than the fact that the music school is sort of inserted in here. But the music school is not getting the kind of the majority of the use ultimately. It is residential. So it's complicated I think by virtue of the fact that the district itself is comprised of two different uses, scales, and the fabrics. But for that reason, and because in fact, what we're not seeing here is the proposal for an institutional building that is this big, and we're not seeing the proposal for residential 4, 3, 5-story within that scale. That's what makes, in my mind, its size, the size and the kind of scope of this proposal inappropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments that have already been said about the size and the placement of the bulk of this building. I agree that it really, the bulk should be shifted to the other side of the site. But I'm also finding that the choice to graduate the color from a lighter to a darker at the top is actually making the building stand out more in contrast with the surroundings. And I think that even if they had done it the opposite way and looked at the brownstones across the street and the church and the base of the Hanson, Hanson place, and had the dark rise up to lighter, I think that would have been more appropriate. But I think there's a lot to be done here, so they may have different ideas about that going forward.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I also felt that Michael Goldblum expressed a great deal of what I felt about the project. First, that the massing really seems too large and inappropriate between BAM and the church, and that it should be in scale on that street, on that side with the institutions, and that some of the massing could be moved to the other side. And I also felt, I've spent a lot of time in Brooklyn with both family and when I was working for the city in various roles. And the bank has always been like a principal icon of Brooklyn, as Jeannie talked about. And I think that it's very important that the new building not appear either as an addition or as competing with the Williamsburg Savings Bank. We really need to have a sense of separation and hierarchy, being very, very clear between that structure and the new structure. And I think that, those things can be achieved by reconfiguring the massing. At least I'm hopeful that that can happen. I think the materiality is appropriate. I also had some concern about those dark side panels, which people have talked about, in the dark color on the top of the building. So I think, we're going to see, I assume, a very different proposal, but I'm in agreement with, I think, the majority of the other commissioners about the massing and the need to make sure that the bank stands apart from and has an appropriate hierarchical relationship with the new structure. I guess the other thing is, I think using the Art Deco as cues for the architecture is, I think, a good direction, is fine. I don't have any problem with that. And use of setbacks, if that occurs in the new proposal, would also, I think, be very appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And I think Commissioner Lutfi would like to add something else. Jeannie, did you want to add something? Your hand was up. No?
You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me? So I just wanted to say the image I was looking at, which refers to Diana's last statement again, was page 52. And I think it's worthwhile to just pull it up because it really does show from the south how the building with this development at this scale, the building looks, the Williamsburg Savings Bank looks like it's been sandwiched.
Okay.
That's it.
Great, thank you. So I want to thank everyone who participated this afternoon. The applicants for a thorough presentation. I'd like to thank all of the members of the public who participated, and then of course to all of you commissioners who have considered it all so carefully and provided thoughtful comments. And so I would say to the applicant that we're obviously not going to vote to approve this today, that there seems to be among some commissioners, some openness to do a taller building here, given the mix of typologies in this end of the district, but that you'll need to restudy the overall height, the massing, and the placement of the massing, the materiality, and the relationship between the new building and One Hanson Place. So we will take no action today, and you can continue to restudy your proposal, and when you're ready, we'll have you back again. So thank you everyone for your participation today, and that is the final item. And so we're going to close our hearing today, and we'll see you all on June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.